Welcome to part 2 of the LocalStorage shopping cart demo. So in this part we're going to be talking about the cart itself. So the cart object, the thing that stores all the data, the thing that is used to display all the data, the thing that's used to communicate with LocalStorage to save it and persist it. So we're talking about visually this part of the interface right here. Now, this part of the interface doesn't have to be part of our cart object. Typically, you want to take functionality and put that in one bunch of code, and then anything to do with the user interface as something different. You don't want to tie your functionality to a specific implementation of the interface. Like, this is what I've chosen, but I'd like to be able to take that same cart object, the thing that generates all the data, the thing that saves all the data, increments, decrements, checks the prices, all those things, and then bring that to another website and use it again without having to always have to do this version of the cart interface. Like, this is just something that I quickly threw together. I don't want to be stuck with this forever just because I'm building a cart. So let's take a look at the code. Inside the script part of my web page. So in part 1, we talked about the CSS, we talked about the layout. Now we're going to be getting into the script. And the very first thing inside the script is this object called cart that I've created. So let's jump in there and take a look. You can see right here inside of our DOM content loaded event, we're calling a function called init inside this cart object. So we jump inside of here, and there's two properties that are, one is an array, one is a string. This string is going to be sort of our unique identifier. This could be coming from an API key. This could be something that we're generating. I just threw in a random string just to have something to use as a reference. Whenever you're saving things inside of LocalStorage on the browser, there has to be some unique string that identifies this. You know, you can have it as your website name as part of it. You can have the folder that you're in as part of it. You can have the timestamp where you created it as part of the name, or just some unique string that you generate. Because LocalStorage exists on the person's computer, so whatever computer they're on, whatever browser they're in, that's where that thing exists. So you only have to make sure that for your domain, this string is going to be unique. So this is going to work just fine for us. We could have something that generated a random string to do that if we wanted. Now, contents, this is an empty array. This is where we're going to store everything that we have in our cart. So as the person selects things, adds things, increases, decreases the quantities, we're going to have an array. And I actually have one right here. This is my dummy one that I created. I wouldn't actually do this on a production site, but just to have some data when I'm first playing around with it, I'm checking to see if LocalStorage has anything, and if it doesn't, I'm filling it with these objects. So this is what the contents of our cart are going to look like. Every single item inside there will have an ID, so a unique identifier for the item, a title that we write out. There could be a description, there could be an image as well, but we're just going to keep it simple. An ID, a title, a quantity, so how many of those items, and then a price per item. So I called it item price. These names, you're not tied to them. It's just this is how I've implemented it here. So for every item in my cart, I have an object. Cart.contents, right up here, cart.contents will be an array of objects like this. So the init method, this is the one that we call when the page first loads. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to LocalStorage and I'm going to call the getItem method, and I'm going to pass it a key. Well, I'm going to use this unique string, and because I've got it hard-coded into my page, every time I come in here, this is the thing that I'm looking for. So let's take a look in the browser. I'll open up the DevTools, inspect, and we can shrink this down a little bit. We're going to go to the application tab. That's where we want to be. And then LocalStorage, inside of there, here's the one for the domain that we're on right now. There's the key, and this is the value. This is the string that's associated with that key. Now remember, with LocalStorage, you can't actually save arrays or objects or things like that. You can save a string that looks like them. And you have to do conversion back and forth with the JSON object. So json.parse, json.stringify to convert it to a string and then back to an object. Down here at the bottom, we have this nice implementation. This is something the DevTools does for us. There's the string, and then it converts it into the object. So we can see, okay, there's 3 things in there. Bell, apple, and banana. The quantities are 2, 5, and 4. Yeah, there's bell, there's banana, there's apple. Quantity 2, 4, 5. And then the item price. So the prices that are here, this is this number multiplied by the item price. So 85 cents times 5, 425. That's what it works out to. You can see this is kind of a little bit squished here. Like I said, I didn't spend a lot of time on the interface. This was just to make it functional. Okay, so what we want to do with our cart is we want to be able to insert something into here. We want to be able to change the quantity up or down. And if the quantity gets down to 0, we want to remove it. Now, everything we have in our cart is saved under one key. That just makes it easy for us to talk to local storage. I don't want to have to go through all the keys, find the matching key, and then look at every key to see which one has the matching ID. I just put everything in one big string. We can do that. There's no cart that we're ever going to get that's going to be too large to fit inside of one key in local storage. All right, so our functions in our cart, we've got here, I'll just collapse all these so we can look at the names and talk about them one at a time. All right, so I have a log contents. This was just for me, really for development. If I want to write it out inside of the console, I can call this log contents. I pass it some string to use as a label, and then I'm writing out the object. It's just a quick way for me to check during development. Again, in production, I would never do this. Sort. Well, when I'm doing a sort, I don't want to actually change anything that's in local storage. Whenever you use local storage, there's always a cost associated with that. Local storage commands like getItem and setItem are actually asynchronous calls. It's just that they happen so quickly that you don't really realize this most of the time. But if you're calling a whole bunch of these things in sequence, you can sometimes get things that happen out of order. So we have to be careful about that. All right, so the sort, what I'm doing is I'm taking the array and I'm doing a custom sort. I'm passing in a field, or I'm optionally passing in a field. If I don't pass one in, it sorts it by title. But I could sort it on title, quantity, item price, whatever I like, any one of them, or the ID even. All I have to do is pass to this cart.sort method. I have to pass some string, and then I use that when I do my sort. So this is just a very basic sort that we're doing. It's a custom sort function that we're passing into the array sort method. Contents is an array. This is the built-in sort method that every array has. This is the function that's being called by it. It will pass us 2 of the items from the array, and then we decide how we want to sort them. So just based on this field. Empty. We want to empty the entire cart. Okay, so there's 2 parts to this. We have contents, which is inside of our object called cart. There's also the cart that's in local storage. Now, I was saying before that every time you talk to local storage, that's an asynchronous call. That's something that actually takes some time to do. It's much faster to do all of your work on the actual contents, the one that's saved in this object that's already loaded in memory in the browser. If you do all the work on this, and then all you do is update the cart, the one that's in local storage. If you update the one in local storage when you're finished working with it, that's much more efficient. So you update this variable, you update the interface. When you're done with that part, then you send the call off to local storage and say, okay, go do the update. That's what my sync method is. So you'll see this throughout. Every time I'm going to update local storage, I will call this. So I'll open up init and sync. These are the 2 places where I'm actually working with local storage. My init function that calls at the beginning, I get the cart key. So we have the contents from local storage. I then if this brought something back. If this doesn't bring something back, if this is undefined, it means it never existed in the first place. That's when we're going to put this inside of the cart. And I will call the sync method. The sync method, I'm actually using async and await to wrap this in a promise. And I'm stringifying the contents and then putting them into the cart using that key that we defined earlier. So that's if it doesn't exist. I'm making this one up and I'm syncing it. If we were working on a production site, I would just have this be an empty array and then do cart.sync. So it will be an empty array that I'm saving inside of there. So let's make a note about that. In production, use an empty array here only. Okay. Now, if we do have something, that's when we want to take what came out of local storage, parse it into an object, and pass it into contents. So that's what a init does. Page loads, we go to local storage, we look to see if it's there. If it is, put it in cart contents. If it's not, create our default one and put it in local storage. Now we're ready to work. The sync function, we're calling it from here to put stuff in. And then anytime we're actually making a change, if we are changing the quantity, if we're changing a price, if we're adding an item, removing an item, any one of those things, that's when we're going to call our sync function to update what's in local storage. But we're going to try not to rely too much on this because we don't want to bog down the processor. Okay, find. Well, you'll find that you actually use functions like this quite a bit. You want to find an item in the cart. All right, one of the ways that we can do it is with a filter method on the array. So cart.contents, that's an array. Call the built-in filter method. I have a video on that if you're unfamiliar with this. Basically, it just loops through everything in the array, and we either return true or false on whether or not we want to keep it. I return false on everything except where the item ID matches the ID that I'm passed in. So those product IDs that we had here, 1, 2, and 3, if I pass in one of those numbers, I want to find the thing in the cart that has the matching number. And if I do find it, I return true, and then that one item gets passed into here. Now, if match, so if the match is something, and there is something in the first element of match, that's what we're going to return from this find method. So we found the one thing, we're going to send it back. We can call this from inside the cart functions, or we can call it from inside of our other code. Add. You want to add a new item to the cart. So this is something entirely new. Well, first thing we do is we're going to call find. We want to know, does the thing exist in the cart already? If it does, so if that returns us something, we're going to call the increase method. Down here, increase, what does this do? Well, it loops through the contents of map, or sorry, the cart contents, calls the map function to loop through it. We're going to look at each one of them. If we find a matching ID, which is what we're passing in, we're going to add this variable, which by default is 1, to the quantity. So we're just incrementing the quantity by 1, return the item. So we're replacing the item inside of the cart. This is going to be the new version. So that was if we found it. We just call increase. So we've already got the item there, just add 1 to it. If we don't find it, that means we need to add something to the cart that is not there already. Products. This is my object that has the array of data that came from the server. So this is the products that we're displaying over here. All these products. We're going to use the filter method again. We're going to loop through, find the one that matches, return false for everything except for the one that matches the ID. We find it. There we are. So if we've got that and there is one thing inside that array, that will be the one product that matched. We're going to get the ID, the title, and the price, those 3 things, from that products array object. The products array looks a lot like our cart does. Here's our cart with those 3 elements in it. If we jump to our JSON file that we're bringing back, there's an ID, there's a title, description, image, and price. So 5 properties instead of 4. This one's got an image, and a description that we don't have. The other one has a quantity. So the cart has a quantity. We don't need a quantity here. We're just displaying information about them. If we wanted, we could bring these over as well. We could include these in the cart. Like, I don't have it here, but if we wanted, we're creating an object here, ID, title, quantity, item, price. If we wanted, we could create a new property called description and say, okay, get it out of that thing that we just found in the products array and get me the description. There. That's all it takes. We've now added another property. We're not using it in the interface anywhere, but yeah, we could if we wanted. Same thing with the image. We could, if we wanted, add that in here. So I'm going to just remove that. I'll leave it in there with a comment. Okay, so we create our new object and then just push it onto the array. That's all it takes to add something to an array. It's just called push and obj. That's the one that we just created based on whatever the match was that we found from the products array. If there is no match, it means we're trying to add a product that didn't exist in our products array in the JSON file, so that shouldn't be allowed. Now, we could call our log contents here. We could call our common error function if we wanted. Either way, this really should never happen because this was built from the JSON file that came back, so we should never get this condition. If we get this, something's really gone wrong. Okay, so after we add to the array, we've changed the array by pushing something in. Now we call sync again. We have to update the local storage. Okay, increase. That's the increment and decrement. You want to add one to the quantity, you want to subtract one from the quantity. That's the increase and reduce. So increase, it's just adding to the quantity. We're doing the map to loop through all of them, looping through everything inside the contents array, looking at the objects one at a time. Item is the object, and just increment the quantity when we have a matching ID. After we've done the update, sync it. Simple enough. Reduce, this code is the exact same except we're doing a minus instead of a plus. And there's one other thing that we have to do. When we are calling reduce, we're going to loop through this. Oh, actually this await shouldn't be there. We're going to do a for each loop. We're going to loop through them. And if the ID matches, so the one that we've called reduce on, when we find that, if the quantity is 0, we're going to call the remove method. So the remove method gets called. That's going to do another filter, update the contents of the cart, and then sync it again. Now we've got two syncs going here. This one is for the reduced quantity. This one is going to be for the removal of the item from the cart. If the quantity is 0, we call remove to get rid of that item from the cart. We don't want to keep something in the cart if the quantity is 0. We definitely don't want anything if it's going to be a negative value, so a -1 or something like that. And that's it. That's all the functionality in the cart. Now there's a few other things that we could add, but for now, this really is the basic functionality that you will need in the cart. So a couple challenges for you guys. Try to use Babel. I've got a video on Babel if you've never used it before. Take this JavaScript file, make it external, and then run Babel on it to convert this back to ES5. I'm using things like this. I'm using Async and Await, which is an ES6 feature. I'm using the ES6 shorthand version. Instead of doing something like this, find is a function that accepts the parameter ID. This is how you would write it back in ES5. But the shorthand version is just this. But this will not be supported in all browsers. So try using Babel, put this in an external file, and then use Babel on it to convert it back to an ES5. And yeah, if you want, you can start playing around with Async and Await. Make some of these asynchronous, make sure, or just wrap things in promises. Situations like down here with the remove. We're calling the remove, and we want to be careful with the remove to get some result back. The sequence of this sync should matter. We don't want to have an item sitting in the cart with a quantity 0. We don't want to remove first and then update afterwards. We want to make sure that these things happen in sequence. So think about how you would wrap some of these functions with promises or using async and await, which effectively is just wrapping them in promises. But at the very least, make this into an external file and use Babel on it to convert it back into ES5 syntax. All right, so that's it for part 2. Stay tuned for part 3. Thanks for watching.